What up guys, finally got a new video. It's called SWIMBAIT SOLUTIONS. Check it out. It's gonna be for the guys that are just trying to get into the game, not the OGs. You guys are gonna know a lot of this stuff already, but check it out anyway. You might catch up on a thing or two. You might pick up on a thing or two. And it's gonna be kind of about what we do to swim baits after we pull them out of the package to get them to do stuff they wouldn't do fresh out the box. So let's get to it. Nail weights, I'll talk about them quickly. Gilbert obviously covers that in his videos with his baits. You see one of them here, Citizen 7. There's no better way to increase the rate of fall on a swim bait than to use these nail weights. It prevents you from having to upsize a hook, which can ultimately ruin the bait a lot quicker. Adding a little bit of weight also get you to cast the bait out further, and my favorite aspect of it is it gets the swim baits to swim an actual swimming action down to the bottom after that long cast, and you'll be surprised at how many hits you get on that initial cast when the bait is swimming directly to the bottom. These little bubble dots I did a video on before. I'll put the link up top. I found them on Amazon. These little bubbles I find useful to glue them up top of the bait right in front of the hook point. I think it helps prevent from picking up little stringers and globs of weed when you're bringing it through heavy stuff. Nothing more annoying when you make a nice long perfect cast and then you end up picking up a stringer and it ruins it. They'll fall off from time to time, but it'll last 10 casts to 50 casts, or maybe sometimes a fish will knock it off, but you can get a whole sheet for a few bucks, so I find them to be helpful. I'll also put the link down in the description below. Tape weight. The ones I got here are made by Bait Sanity. You can get other ones on Amazon, Tackle Warehouse, or whatever. But I like these because I tried ones on Amazon before and they are really hard to get off. They leave residue and stuff. These go on real easy, they stay on really good, and they peel off really easy without leaving any type of residue behind on the bait. But these are just a good way to tune your hard baits, tune them the way you like to fish them. You know, sometimes you have a bait where you're trying to glide it or twitch it and will nose up. You could take these little weights and tape them to the front of the bait to keep the nose down, or vice versa, whatever. Just they're a good little tool to tune the baits the way you like to fish them and also increase the sink rate. So if you got a slow sink and you want to go out to deeper water, you just throw some of these on the bottom, get it to sink a little bit quicker. The other good thing with the Bait Sanity ones is you can use a pair of scissors and just cut them really easy. You know, different baits, you obviously have different amount of space on the bottom to put these tape weights, so being able to cut them really easy and apply them in little spaces is a benefit. They bend and curve, so if you got to put them in some weird spots, that also works. You can also stack them on top of each other. They're just fun to play around with, see what it does to the bait. I know a lot of guys use them on the DRT clash baits too. You know, those baits kind of act like jerk baits. When you crank them, they'll kind of hold their position pretty good. So if you want to do that, but just, you know, a couple inches or a couple feet deeper, add some of these on the bottom of those. But otherwise, I think they're just fun to play around with, tune your bait, especially while you're out there skunking on the water, try and learn something. Rotating treble hooks. These are made by SpinTech. I believe they're the first ones to make them, according to the package. I found them on Tackle Warehouse. Essentially, will turn any bait you don't have that has swiveling hook hangers into one that does, except the hook itself is what is swiveling. You guys know me and Tom are big advocates for swiveling hook hangers. So any bait, any big bait that doesn't have these, I'm gonna start throwing them on. They spin super freely, and anytime we can prevent the fish from having leverage of spitting that bait out when you're trying to crank it to the boat, I think is an advantage for the angler. Do you need them on small baits? No, I don't think so. I think anything over 3 or 4 ounces, it would be smart to. The regular hooks can just get kinked up and give that fish added leverage to spit the bait out. These, I think, would be better to use on like wake baits or crank down baits. I don't know if I would use them on a glide bait, something you're working really slow. The hook are a little more bulky because, you know, there's more mechanics inside of the bait, so it's going to be easier for the fish to see the hooks. But like I said, wake baits, crank down baits, I wouldn't hesitate for a minute to try and throw these on and see how they work out. So I like to bevel the bill on some of my big wake baits, especially the ones that have really big bills. This is a grumpy gill, and that big bill helps it in what it was designed to do, which is get through weeds and everything really good. Problem is, when you cast it out, the line will wrap around the big bill and you'll get fray and your line will get torn up a little bit. This was a prototype. I don't know if the newer ones have sharp edges or not, but I have a bunch of baits like this. It's not a big deal. I just like to put a little bevel going all the way around it, and it helps tremendously with not getting your line all torn up right around the line tie. And obviously that could prevent you from losing a big fish. You never know. I think it's worth it. I got the idea because one of my swim baits has this beautifully polished bevel going all the way around it, and I never had any issue with line fray, so I figured I'd just start doing it to all the swim baits that I have the issue with. You know, it takes 2 minutes. It's worth it. I'm not trying. I spend all this time out on the water. The last thing I want to do is lose a fish for a stupid reason like that. I'll also take some sandpaper and smooth it out. I think this is like 400 grit sandpaper. I'll just smooth it out a little bit because that attachment I have on the Dremel is not the smoothest, so I'll just go around, smooth it out on both sides. But I'll do any little thing that will help give me the advantage over the fish. That's the whole point of this, is to put big fish in the boat. So I've been just tying a Palomar knot my whole life, and I've never had an issue with it, so I'm just always sticking with the Palomar knot. But the one thing that annoys me, you get this little tag, especially on soft baits when you're bringing the stuff through weeds. That little tag will pick up so much crap. It's almost unbelievable. I searched the internet for different knots that try and make the tag end go to the tail side of the bait so the weeds would just flow off it, and I could not find anything. So if you guys know of a knot that does that, please let me know in the comments. But what I do with the Palomar knot is at the end, I just take that tag end, I stick it back through the little loop, and then I'll cinch it down and pull that tag back through the other side to get it to go the opposite way. It's insane how good this works. The weeds just love catching that little, like the stuff I fish. This ponds I fish, it's like a submerged swamp. So you get all this little muck, and that mucky shit gets stuck on that little tag end so easily. So to have the tag end going backwards instead of creating that little V helps tremendously from getting all that little crap stuck on that knot. As you can see now, it's going the opposite way. Still got the Palomar knot, super strong. Still goes through the eyelet twice. Try to snap it, can't. Same knot, just got the tag end going backwards instead of forward. And just another little trick to help keep the weeds off the bait. Want it to keep swimming right. You don't want to keep the shit off the bait so that the bait looks delicious to the fish. Vision strips, high vis strips, whatever you want to call them. Great little tool. I like them specifically for glide baits, twitch baits, any bait that you really excel at when you can actually see what it's doing. Most of my success with glide baits is when I can actually see it, not so much when I let them sink to the bottom and can't really see what they're doing. But that's just me. But you put these on them and it allows you to see the bait in the water much better, especially when you're first learning glide baits, to be able to see what the bait's doing with how you're implementing actions of cadence with the handle. You can actually see how the bait's working with the rod tip, or how it all pieces together. When you can actually see it moving in the water, you kind of get to learn what the bait's doing with what you're doing. So when you actually are fishing it in deeper water, you kind of know the cadence that works. So it's a good way to learn how to fish it, and it's also, I just prefer to always be able to see it, especially when you're fishing in the shallows. Some guys might be worried, oh, you put that big ugly orange sticker on the fish and you think a bass isn't going to see that. Well, if you're fishing a glide bait and you're fishing shallow or deeper water and you're working it, like a lot of times you're fishing this bait above the bass's head, so the bass is not seeing the top of the bait. I would not be worried about that.
All right, so Tyler already covered a bunch of cool shit. I think another little tidbit of information that can help some of you guys just getting into the bigger swim bait game. Well, there's a few. So with soft plastics, I like to add these little teeny glass rattles. Just a little glass with 2 little metal beads in it. Generally with the soft plastics, I'll take like the meatiest part of the head, and it's as simple as just sticking it right in. Usually, like, oh, I just hit one now, but I have lead weights in the head of this one as well, or tungsten weights. So it's hard to tell, but you can see the 2 holes on the sides where I stick my weights, and then right in the middle is where I put that little rattle. Simple. Super simple, makes a difference. Especially for me, I fish these like jigs more than I do like a slow, steady reel. I tend to pop them, let them come back down and die. And just having that extra little shake that's in the head, I think makes a big difference. Also with these soft plastics, I like to dip dye them a little bit, just to switch up the regularities. A lot of the waters that we fish now are like pretty highly pressured, so I feel like if they're used to seeing the same baits every day, they catch on. Maybe the dye helps, maybe the scent helps, I really don't know, but it works. So I just use your typical garlic scented dip dye. Stick the tail in, don't let it drip on anything that you like, because it'll stay in it forever and it'll smell like shit forever. So I'll dip them, hang them over the water for, I don't know, like 30 seconds, a minute, whatever. They dry and they stay that color forever. These are probably 2 years old. This thing's actually kind of smoked. I don't know if you can see all the teeth marks in it, but she gets chewed a lot. And this thing's been dip dyed since day one, really. One other thing I like to do with soft plastics is I use some sort of jelly, right? This is just the one I have on me right now. I've had it for a while, but you have your own brands out there. These I like to coat. Generally, I'll go from like the side of the head to just behind where the hook actually sits, almost as a lubrication more than anything else. It's a bonus that it smells, but when the fish grab these things, you need to wait. And if you watch more of our old videos, Tyler goes through it in depth, but I usually try to count to like 4 or 5, make sure that the fish is really, really on there, then you give her hell. And I feel like having it lubed up essentially really helps that bait come out fast enough for the hook to grab and penetrate. Just another cheap little trick you can add to your arsenal. Another thing I like to do is, Tyler touched on it with the swivel hook hangers, right? So if you don't have those fancy little hooks that have the built-in swivels and your bait doesn't have swiveling hook hangers, like OG rats don't, and this thing's huge. So what I do is I just add a second split ring in. So you have your base one from the bait, and I add one more to the hook. So instead of only having, you know, 180 degrees of twist, when you add that second split ring in, it gives you almost 360, which I've lost an unbelievable amount of fish on this bait, because it's one of my favorites, just because if they only catch that rear hook and it can't move freely, when that fish comes up to try to shake it, it's really just using all this extra weight against you. Because now when it goes to throw, instead of it just shaking, you know, something teeny like this, where it's not gonna, you're not gonna rip a hook out shaking this thing. When you're shaking this, if you only got one hook in and it's the rear one, sounds like a 22 goes off. There goes your bait. You're butthurt all day after that. It's a cheap and easy way of adding a little bit more wiggle room in the back of your baits, front of your baits, whatever. just add that extra split ring. It's a lifesaver. Another thing that I find to be important is batteries, right? I got myself this year. Every year I change my batteries in my scale, and I keep a spare backup pair in a Ziploc bag in my bag. This year I had to use the backup pair, forgot to replace them, and then on my second to last trip this year, one of the biggest fish I caught of the year, went to turn my scale on and it was dead as shit, and I had no backup batteries. So if you're fishing for that trophy bass, I gotta tell you, you need to pack extra batteries. Whatever size they are, like I said, at the beginning of the season, make sure they're fresh, first trip out, brand new ones. When you buy those brand new ones, buy a spare pair, keep them in your bag. You'll thank me later. One more thing. Rubber net. You know, we're out here chasing giant fish, right? The last thing you want to do is boat flip it, or if you're shore banging, flip it up onto the rocks and have the thing flop around and mess his coat up, or get whatever. Don't even bother risking it. These things aren't even that expensive. It'll save your legs from getting hooks stuck in them, your hands from getting hooks stuck in them. It'll help you land the fish instead of it shaking off at the side of the boat because you didn't use double split rings like I said to on your bigger baits. A net. Don't forget it. Great to have. Cheap investment. You have it forever. And on that same note, pliers, right? These are just the Amazon style pliers, whatever you want, needle nose. These ones happen to have the whole split ring tool built into the tip of them. So it's like a double banger for your buck there. That'll even show you. Right? Just cause those hooks are big, they're sharp, you catch a bone, something weird inside the fish's mouth, trying to get that thing out with your hands, you're gonna have the bass out of the water for 10 minutes. And when you have a pair of pliers, comes right out, saves the fish, saves you time, saves your fingers from getting stabbed. No brainer. Again, cheap, easy. It'll help you out in the future. The one last pointer I could give you guys who are new to the big bait thing is to check your line often. A lot of these baits, especially your fishing soft plastics, you're trying to bounce them off a structure and cover and all that nonsense. You won't be able to see them all the time depending on what kind of line you're using, but just run your finger up the line. I do it every few casts. Just so you know there's no little nicks or abrasions. If there is, snip it, retie it. I used to not do that, and I used to lose a lot of fish. And it's through my own mistakes I've learned. It's my number one thing now. Also, if you watch the videos, you'll see I cast into the trees a lot. So generally, just check your line. You know, every other bait you put on, check it. Every few casts, when you bring it back to the boat, run your hand up it. It'll save your ass.